All right, finally we have New York English and a very cool study by Labov. So there are a lot of different Englishes found in and around New York City. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of other languages altogether found in and around New York City. There's a lot of people there. They include the Black English, African American vernacular, the sort of Bostonian accent, the Northeastern, the New Jersey English with coffee. I had a roommate in college who spoke like that. It was great. There's also sort of the Yiddish English, and a lot of different varieties. So many people in one little area, so it's not surprising. Okay, in 1966, Labov wanted to test his theory that he developed at Martha's Vineyard using a bigger population in New York City. So his theory was that speakers would change their dialect according to the group that they want to identify with. So in Martha's Vineyard, the locals who went away to college and came back to the island wanted to identify with the locals and not with the sort of wealthy vacationers, and so they strengthened that vineyard dialect. So I wanted to test this theory in New York City. And his sort of testing ground was this R. So most American accents are rhotic, so they have R. All the R's are pronounced, even at the ends of syllables. But in New York at the time, and also in Boston still more so today, they had that sort of non-rhotic accent. And this was 1966. After the Depression, these sort of urban R-dropping accents were starting to lose their prestige, and the Midwestern accent, where all of the R's were pronounced, was starting to be the sort of standard or prestigious variety. So what he did is very cool. He could not interview speakers like he did on Martha's Vineyard, so he decided to elicit possible R pronunciations in both spontaneous and careful speech by going to different department stores and asking for a department that he knew was on the 4th floor. So if he went to Macy's and he knew that women's shoes were on the 4th floor, he'd find a sales clerk and say, where's women's shoes? And then the sales clerk would say, on the 4th floor. And then Labov would pretend he didn't hear. He'd go, where? And the person would repeat it again more carefully, the 4th floor. So he got each person to pronounce the words twice, once sort of in more natural, spontaneous speech, and once more carefully. So he went to 3 different stores catering to 3 distinct social groups: Saks, Macy's, and this S. Klein, which I'm not familiar with, but which catered to people from lower socioeconomic classes. And he found that the use of the R corresponded to the higher class of the store. And remember, at this time, it was becoming more prestigious to pronounce all of your R's. And what he found is that the use of R increased in careful speech. So when people were speaking carefully, they were more likely to use the more prestigious variety. And also, the use of R corresponded to the class of the store. I think I skipped that point. So at the higher class stores, the sales clerks were more likely to pronounce all of their R's. They were more likely to use that prestigious variety. And also, the same was true according to the rank of the employee. So the higher ranked employees produced more R's. Okay, so here's the chart. This might be a little confusing, but you can see here at Saks, which is the highest class store, the sales clerks were most likely to produce their R's. So some of the sales, let's see, that's about 35% of the sales clerks at Saks produced R's always. At Macy's, it was about the same, and then at S. Klein, it was, down at around 15%. And then sometimes, so adding in the careful speech, at Saks you have more than 60% of the sales clerk producing their R's in that sort of prestigious Midwestern way, around 50% at Macy's, and then down still only around 20% at the Klein store. So you can see there that according to the socioeconomic class of the store, the employees were manipulating whether or not they used that R, and especially in careful, sort of more conscious speech. We also have one other little chart here, and you can see this is comparing the casual, so the first and second utterance. The first utterance was the casual, the second utterance was the more controlled, conscious production. So the word fourth here, you can see at sales clerks at Saks, the first time they said fourth, they were 30% of them said the R, and the second time it was up at around 65%. And at Macy's, it was similar, like maybe 27% of the first time they said fourth, 27% of the employees at Macy's said the R, and it was up, at 45% for in the more careful production. And at the S. Klein store, the first production, only 5% of people said the R in fourth, and then it was up at around maybe 9% of people when they were speaking more carefully. But again, that really highlights both the difference between sort of careful speech and casual speech, and also the influence of sort of your social aspirations on your dialect. Okay, so we've talked a lot about prestigious versus stigmatized dialects. I just want to wrap up by pointing out that there are different types of prestige. There is overt prestige, which is seeking prestige by assimilating to the standard. That's what the employees at Saks and at Macy's were doing. They were adding in those R's because that was becoming the standard prestigious dialect. There's also covert prestige. And this is, what speakers maybe of Black English will do. They are choosing to differ from the standard in order to have prestige within their own social group. It may not be prestigious in the country as a whole, but among their friends and their family, that's the prestigious dialect. There's also a difference between positive and negative prestige. So positive, you're seeking prestige by adopting some feature. You're adding in those R's. Negative prestige is seeking prestige by avoiding a feature. And I think the best example of this is me and the word like. People say the word like all the time now. It's sort of associated with that California Valley Girl English. But in the academic world, which is where I spend a lot of my time, it's not considered very prestigious. And so I try to avoid saying like as much as I can. It's hard, but that's sort of me seeking prestige by avoiding using like too much. All right, that is it for today. And I will be back with more lectures on accents.